Right now, all around you, a machine is running. You can't see it, but it never sleeps. Every second, it moves billions of dollars across the planet, faster than any human can follow. And quietly, it decides your money, your job, your future. But this machine was switched on more than 400 years ago, in one small building in Amsterdam. Back then, money was simple. You had it or you didn't. Then a few merchants asked a strange question. What if you could buy and sell the future? Not gold, not land, the future itself. A harvest that hadn't grown yet, a ship that hadn't come home. They found a way to put a price tag on tomorrow and sell it today. And that one idea didn't just make people rich. It hit fast forward on human history. And almost nobody knows this story. This is how the first stock exchange taught the world to sell the future and changed what it means to be human. For all of history, wealth meant one thing, something you could touch: land, gold, grain in a barn. Then the merchants of Amsterdam built a machine that broke the link between time and money. They invented the joint stock company, a way for thousands of strangers to own a sliver of the same venture. Suddenly, you didn't have to be a king to fund a fleet. You only had to buy a share. For the first time, ordinary people could spend the profits of a future that hadn't happened yet. Private savings became a collective pool of capital, large enough to fund projects bigger than any kingdom. To understand what they built, you have to understand the fear they were trying to tame. A voyage to the East Indies took 3 years. Storms, pirates, disease, the dark unknown of the open sea. A single ship might come home with a fortune in pepper and silk, or it might never come home at all. For centuries, that risk was a wall. No one sane would pour their whole life's savings into one wooden hull. The Amsterdam Exchange did something miraculous with that fear. It turned the voyage into a piece of paper, a share, a small printed claim on whatever that fleet might one day bring back. And here was the magic. You could buy that paper in the morning and sell it again by the afternoon. You no longer had to wait 3 years to see your money. You could leave whenever you wished. This was liquidity. The power to walk away from your bet at any moment. And that single power changed everything, because knowing you could exit made it safe to enter. A merchant who feared being trapped for a decade would happily risk a year's wages he could reclaim by sundown. So the money came, not from princes, from bakers, widows, clerks, and dock workers. They crowded the exchange floor, shouting prices, trading slips of paper for slips of gold. For the first time in history, an ordinary person's wealth was no longer tied to the work of their hands. It was tied to something invisible: the growth of an idea, the promise of a future return. The future had become a thing you could own, divide, and sell. And humanity would never think the same way again. One man's gamble can ruin him. So the exchange did something colder and far more powerful. It took the terrifying risk of a single voyage and shattered it into 1,000 tiny pieces. Each piece, a share. Each share, small enough for an ordinary person to swallow without fear. And it spread those pieces across a crowd of anonymous strangers who would never meet. When a ship sank, no single family was destroyed. The loss dissolved quietly into the crowd. And because the pain was shared, the daring multiplied. People risked more, precisely because they risked it together. This is the quiet engine still humming beneath every market on Earth. Risk, fractured into pieces small enough to bear. It is perhaps the most powerful financial idea ever conceived. But this engine had a darker side, one we cannot look away from. The same capital that built comfortable fortunes also built fleets of war. It paid for cannons, for soldiers, for the iron machinery of conquest. Shares in the great companies funded the violent seizure of distant lands. Trading posts became forts. Forts became colonies. Colonies became empires. The money an Amsterdam widow invested for her retirement helped reshape the entire globe by force. Few of those investors ever saw the violence their capital set in motion. They only saw the dividends. And meanwhile, the exchange itself was becoming something the world had never witnessed. A single nervous system for all of human ambition. A distant war, a failed harvest, a ship lost in a storm. News of it rippled across the floor within hours. And the price of a share would shift instantly, pricing in a future that had just changed. For the first time, the value of paper in one city was bound to events an entire ocean away. The world had been wired together. Slowly, over generations, a strange inversion took hold. Almost no one noticed it happen. The paper began to matter more than the thing it represented. A company's true worth was no longer counted in its ships, its warehouses, its sacks of spice. It was a number. A price on the exchange, rising and falling on hope and rumor. This is the Great Decoupling, the symbol of value floating free from the physical world that birthed it. A merchant could grow rich while his ships rotted in the harbor, simply because others believed his shares would rise. And that belief, the belief in tomorrow's growth, became more real than any cargo of gold. Value was no longer something you held in your hands. It was something you expected. It planted an obsession we still live inside today. The hunger for more, every season, forever. A company was no longer judged by what it was, but by how fast it promised to grow. The need to outpace the present began to bend whole nations to its will. It shaped laws. It rewrote the ancient rules of property and debt. It funded canals, then railroads, then factories that swallowed the horizon in smoke. It rebuilt entire cities around the restless movement of capital. Streets were laid, harbors dug, mountains tunneled, all to serve the rising number. The future was no longer something we waited for, patiently, with the turning of the seasons. It was something we priced, traded, and borrowed against long before it ever arrived. We began to mortgage tomorrow to pay for today. We had taught ourselves to live inside a future that did not yet exist, and we forgot how to stop. 400 years later, that same logic runs the entire world. Only now, it moves at the speed of light. The shouting crowd on the exchange floor is gone. In its place, silent rooms of humming machines, glowing in the cold light of the present future. Algorithms now trade millions of times every second. They price a tomorrow that no human eye can even perceive. A war breaks out, a harvest fails, a leader speaks a single sentence, and before you finish reading the headline, the future has already been bought and sold. Every possibility, every fear, every hope swallowed and priced in an instant. We have built a reality where the future is already fully spent, already owned, already gone. A world so completely priced in that there is almost no room left for the unplanned, no room for the organic, the slow, the surprising. Markets now move on the predictions of machines predicting other machines, a vast mirror reflecting a future that feeds on itself. And we live inside it, our savings, our pensions, our homes, all woven into the same endless calculation. The merchants of Amsterdam wanted only to tame a single fear, the fear of a ship that might not return. They could never have imagined what their small invention would become, a machine that turned time into money and then turned the whole world into a market. And so they leave us with the question they never thought to ask. By turning the future into cash, did we finally set humanity free? Or did we trap ourselves in an endless debt to a tomorrow that never quite arrives? The building still stands in Amsterdam, quiet now, a museum, but the machine they built inside it has never, for a single second, stopped.